Razmik Panossian, thank you for being with us. I want to say something before we start talking about the Gulbenkian project's program in the digitization of Armenian language, literature, humanities. And that is that I think that at this time in our history, we're very fortunate that you are running the Armenian program at Gulbenkian and that your partner, your boss, Martin Yesayan, the great-grandson of Calouste Gulbenkian, and you are on the same wavelength in terms of breaking new ground. So let me just say thank you on behalf of all of us before we start.
Thank you. You're making me blush, Salpi, already.
Can't tell. Wish you were here. We'd be able to tell.
I wish as well. It's a bit far, but I wish. Thank you.
No, thank you. Razmik, let's start with the cynical question. That is, Armenian language, literature, so much is in trouble, so much is in need of protection, preservation. Is it a luxury to be dealing with questions of digitization?
First of all, let me say preservation, yes, but we're also always talking about advancement and revitalization. So it's not just keeping the old, but it's also producing new culture in Armenian language and new tools, methodologies, etc., etc. So let's always keep that in mind. Is it a luxury? Absolutely not, because historically, Armenians have always been at the forefront of taking new technologies and adopting it to Armenian context. With the digital revolution, we haven't really done that all that much. We have very bright, very good people, IT experts, for example, but that schism has really grown between language, culture, and technology. So for me, it's not a luxury, it is a necessity. We must get into the area of technologies, new technologies, and we must be at the forefront of adapting our culture, our needs to this new environment in which we're working. And digital humanities and a bunch of other IT-related innovations is absolutely crucial for this. Otherwise, the language will remain for the past, for history, for grandparents, for the kitchen, to talk about dolma salma, and we will not be using it for anything that's new. And that's the surest way of making sure the language dies.
And with that premise, Gulbenkian jumped into a very both pioneering and encouraging program of supporting work in this area. And you've divided that into 3 categories of work that Gulbenkian would like to support. Tell us about it, especially the technology part.
Yes, I mean, Gulbenkian, the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation does a lot of work in various domains, scholarships, support to Armenian schools in the diaspora, etc., etc. Because in our 5-year plan, we identified Western Armenian as a very important element of what we ought to be doing, and we identified the importance of IT and the new technologies as something that we should be working with. We thought that we should devote some of our resources into this domain as well. And it started actually with a rather naive presumption on my part, being a technological Luddite, more or less, that why don't I have a good Western Armenian spell checker on my smartphone? There is one for Eastern Armenian, but there isn't one for Western Armenian. So I thought, okay, let's commission somebody, let's give a grant in order to develop this. Then I talked to some of the real experts, and they said, wait a second, it's not that easy. It's not that easy to develop a spell checker because you need a Western Armenian corpus.
Explain that, please. That's the piece that needs explaining.
That's right. So, and so I thought, okay, this is much more complicated and much bigger than I initially thought. And how am I going to go about doing this? And that's when we put together this seminar with the Tumor Center in Yerevan, where we brought together the technology folks, the pedagogy folks, and the language folks. These people never sit together. It was the first time we actually put them together in the same room. And we said, at the end of these 2 days, we want a plan and an actionable set of events on which we can act. And the announcement came out of that. So what the Western Armenian corpus is, it's to create in the digital world millions and millions of words in Western Armenian based on which programs develop for the spell checker. Because when you in Microsoft or on your iPad, whatever, if you're writing in English and it's correcting your spelling mistakes, it's not doing it because someone is checking it against a dictionary. It's doing it because it's checking it against millions and millions of words that exist somewhere in the digital space. And we don't have that for Western Armenian. So we need to create that, and then we need to tie that into the programming element that is the spell checker, the grammar checker, or any other tool or app that you want to develop out of that. And hence, the first element of the call for proposals is to develop that Western Armenian corpus. There is one for Eastern Armenian, but we need to develop one for Western Armenian.
So the technology is one piece. You also have a language and education piece.
That's right. Our experience so far is because we did a similar, much smaller call in 2014 for games and apps for children. And out of that, we learned that these three pieces are crucially important. And we are strong in some and weak in others. I say we, I'm talking about the Armenian world. Let me repeat again because it's absolutely crucial. In order to develop a very simple app for children, let's say, you need an expert on language. You need an expert because the language has to be correct. If there are mistakes, parents and children are ticked off. And Western Armenian is even more complicated because people think I'll just end the duni lalu dener gnem. It's similar, but it's not. The logic of the language between Eastern and Western is different. But in any case, so the language component is very important. The pedagogical important element is very important. How are you going to show this to the kids? And there are huge differences from country to country in that, right? What is appropriate for Armenia is not appropriate for the diaspora and vice versa. So there's the pedagogical element. And then finally, of course, and important, is the technological element. The colors have to be nice. The little figures have to be pleasant to the kids.
Design matters, of course.
So what we learned is that on the technology front, we Armenians are pretty strong. On the pedagogy front, we're very weak, and the language is somewhere in between. So it's not a question of taking something that's developed in Armenia and just changing a few things and making it appropriate for diaspora. You need to develop for the diaspora children, for the diaspora psychology, et cetera, et cetera. And those three elements, it's very difficult to bring them together and find them together. So we find often that we're putting teams together. And of course, whenever you put teams, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And so things get slower in that respect.
It's interesting that you say that because part of what we've been saying in order to explain what we're doing here today is to say that what we're doing is building community among the users, community among the creators, and a common community there so that this process can move along. So it's very important what you just said. And finally, the third piece, content development.
Right. So the first piece is the Western Armenian corpus. The second piece is regarding teaching tools. And the third piece is regarding the content. And the content component is to actually have good Armenian, Eastern or Western, but in our case, we put the emphasis on Western, good Armenian content on the web. For example, to have appropriate teenagers or children's or adult stories, to use the web to create culture, not just to download a PDF of our great novelists, but to actually use the web as an opportunity through which we can write a novel. I mean, collectively, or we can use it to develop a graphic novel or something like that. So there are many things that could be done in the web, and all of us in our private English, French, Portuguese, whatever worlds are engaged in this. But when it comes to Armenian, we sort of go back to early 20th century literature, and we don't produce the more. And we need to use the web and the new technologies in order to do this, in order to create this content in Armenian.
What do you think? You've identified a lot of the specific areas of weakness and strength. If we were to say that where we are now in the digitization process is digitization 1.0, what is it that you think 2.0 can be?
For me, it would be seamlessly being able to move between Armenian and another language, the dominant language. In the United States, it's English, in France, it's French, whatever. 2.0 for me would be where I can do almost all the things that I can do in French or English with my smartphone or with the apps and things like that. I should be able to do it in Armenian as well, and just as easily. You switch the fonts very easily. The spell check works. The grammar check works. Then I can I can download something. I'll go to a city. I'll download the information in English or French or whatever. Then I should be able to, at least for some cities, download it in Armenian as well. And so create a world in which there's this seamless interaction between the Armenian and the non-Armenian, whichever the non-Armenian might be. Now, of course, English, let's not kid ourselves. English is the dominant language in this field, right? And so we have to, constantly be interacting with that. But Armenian shouldn't be the language that is, as I said, just for the kitchen and just for grandparents. It should be language through which I can send a tweet if I want to send a tweet, and another person in China or wherever be able to read it in Armenian.
I have a last question, and it has to do with Gulbenkian, and it has to do with the Institute of Armenian Studies. And that is that the nature of this work seems to me to be very much the work of monks. These are the modern day monks. They're sitting in their rooms, in their living rooms, in their silos, and doing the groundwork that is so very important.
Mm-hmm.
Where is your role? Where is our role? Is there a role here for a coordinating, bringing together, funding, of course, body?
Well, of course. I mean, the metaphor of monks, I'm smiling because I'm sitting in a city that has 40 to 50 Armenians, not 40 to 50,000 Armenians, 40 to 50 Armenians.
What is that city? We might want to come visit.
In Lisbon, yes. So there isn't a community here per se. But I think the convening power of an institution like the Gulbenkian Foundation and perhaps some other institutions is very important. And in order to convene, you have to convene around a project or an issue, you have to have a vision of where you want to go, right? And I think that's very important for us. It's like we developed a plan, a vision. We want to achieve this. That was not developed out of the blue. It was developed in constant dialogue and communication with the Armenian world, with the Armenian leaders and intellectuals and just everyone from top to bottom. And so once you have that idea, then around that you can coalesce people, and money helps. I mean, we are very, very fortunate as a foundation that we have an independent source of income, even though the Armenian Communities Department is not that large. It's a relatively small department, but nevertheless, we have that independence, and we have a supportive board that says, okay, run with it, and then the rest is up to us to actually do the things that we want to do. It's how you identify yourself. I mean, as a director of the department, I see the Gulbenkian Foundation, the Armenian Communities Department, the Armenian world, but principally focusing on the diaspora, because this is where I think we need a lot of resources in order to sustain the diaspora and to make it flourish.
I liked that line, that it's up to us to make it work, to do it. So thank you very much. That's a perfect place to end this conversation, and we look forward to more.
Thank you very much, Salvi, and hello to everyone. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there, but perhaps next time. Thank you.